Hello, EDF4430 friends. Today we are going to learn about your mini-teach, which is also known as Design and Implement Formative and Summative Assessments. So let's get started. So this particular mini-teach covers a couple major FEAPs, the Florida Educator Accomplished Practices, in that you will design and align formative and summative assessments that match the learning objectives and lead to masteries with students in your classroom, and that the teacher candidate examines and uses data-informed research to improve instruction and student achievement. So for this particular assignment, the mini-teach, we have provided you with a lesson plan template that includes universal design for learning strategies. So you are going to upload the template and actually plan out a lot of your lesson before you actually implement it in the classroom. The lesson plan applies to any grade level or any content area. So it's good for everything, VPK all the way to 12, so it works for everyone. At the beginning, you start with an introduction describing your grade level and content area, as well as the demographics of the students in your class. That could be your host classroom or your own personal classroom if you're a teacher of record. So let us know who is in the classroom, because that kind of gives us context to what we should be expecting on the lesson plan. You need to grab those standards that you're going to be teaching in this lesson, teaching and assessing. They can be from the best standards, they can be the science standards that you're teaching, whatever aligns with the area that you're teaching. You also need to set up some lesson objectives, such as this, by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to X, Y, and Z. And you don't have to make too many objectives, but I would say at least a couple would be appropriate for a mini-teach. Also need to provide an overview of the lesson that kind of gives a short summary of the lesson. That is not the part that is a line-by-line description. The overview is just that. You kind of tell us, this is going to be a science lesson involving hands-on materials in order to teach X, Y, Z, or whatever it is that you're going to be teaching. It's just sort of a narrative summary. You're going to be coming up with a couple questions in which you'll reflect on after you give the lesson, but you're going to do that ahead of time. You also need to list out think about a pre and post assessment so that you can demonstrate that your students have learned. And that data is going to be collected at the beginning and at the end of the lesson so that you can compare. The pre and post assessment can be the same assessment. It can be done using technology. It can be done paper and pencil. If you're working with the littles, it can be done orally, but somehow you need to record it so that you know what students' answers are. Does not have to be a long pre and post assessment. The pre and post assessment, it can be anywhere from 5 questions or so to 10 questions. Obviously, if you're in secondary, it can be more than 10 questions. But if you're working with kindergarten, first, second, third grade, you really don't want more than 5 to 10 questions max. You need to describe what activity you're going to be using to teach the standards. And that includes hands-on materials as well as technology that you can use. But again, you can use the technology piece for the actual assessment itself, or you can use it within the lesson. And by technology, we're talking things like videos, or they could be using, you could be using an interactive whiteboard. The students could be using their iPads or their computers. You could be playing a game such as Kahoot or Lookit. Whatever you decide. The lesson procedure section should be very detailed. I should know step by step exactly how you are teaching this lesson. Include the time units for the lesson. So in the first 5 minutes, you're going to do this, and then in the following 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to be doing this. As well as a detailed description, so that if you handed that lesson plan to somebody else, such as a substitute or another teacher, they could be able to replicate that lesson plan. Now, you do not have to create lesson plans out of thin air. Definitely look at CPOMs, definitely use the curriculum map for your grade level. You can use the course textbook or content level textbook that you have. You do not have to create this lesson plan on your own. Please use the resources that you have available to you. And then during the lesson, the students should be doing some sort of activity that you can check for understanding, that they understand the concept, so that if there are any misconceptions, you can clarify those misconceptions. If there are students who, if you need to differentiate the lesson, if there are some students who pick up the material quicker, that you have materials for them to work on while you're working with the other kiddos who are not picking it up as quick. Or if you've got a student who's absent, thinking about, how you will catch them up when you get back. But you need to have some kind of activity that you can tell that they are understanding the lesson and that you can make adjustments with along the way. And that's called a performance assessment. Performance assessments are typically assessed with rubrics, and using the course content materials and what we learn in class, you'll definitely be able to create a rubric that goes along with your performance activity that happens during the lesson. And then following the lesson, you're going to administer a post-assessment. Again, 5 to 10 questions, could be the same questions that you have for the pre-assessment. All of this does not have to be done on the same day. You could be doing the pre-assessment on one day, the lesson on day 2, and the post-assessment on day 3. Or you could do it all in one day, or you could be doing it parts in one day back to back, etc. It's probably a good idea to have those assessments close to when you're teaching the actual lesson. And then at the end, you are reflecting on how the assessment went and answering those questions that you created prior to implementing the lesson. Think about, things that you would have done differently or ways to improve, and, making adjustments for future teachings. There is, along with this lesson plan template, you are going to have to implement, or you're going to have to upload your assessments, your pre and your post, as well as results. It would be great to see some student samples in there, and those are part of the appendices. So, in other words, this is a good chunk of time to get all of this together and organized, so make sure that you give yourself plenty of time, and that if you're in a host teacher's classroom, that you make sure your host teacher is on board with you implementing a lesson, either in one day or over the course of a couple days. It should align with the content that is currently being taught in the host classroom. So you should kind of stick along with the curriculum map and whatever standards are being taught that week. I have some sample tests for you, assessments in the course, as well as there are some sample in the course textbook for what a traditional pre and post test looks like. They are multiple choice questions, true, false. They could be binary questions, fill in the blank, etc. We also have provided some sample performance rubrics for you. My advice to you is to align the number of categories that you have with the grade levels. So for kindergarten, first and second, you really shouldn't have more than 2 indicators that you're looking for when the students are doing their activities. So as you can see on the screen, maybe it's that they completed the activity and that they completed the activity accurately. And you can come up with a very simplistic way of assessing that. I do love to see pictures of your activities that you're doing. So if you're a host teacher, or if you can get a colleague, or if you take pictures of their final product or the lesson that they're doing, that is wonderful, because that kind of gives me context to the lesson that you're teaching. It helps me visualize and kind of see the lesson plan. And you could, of course, also include the pre-post test as well as the performance assessment. As I was mentioning before in the appendix, so you've got your lesson plan template, then you have your appendix, and in the appendix I should see the pre and post test results of every student that took the assessment. That includes an Excel spreadsheet that has both a pre-test column and a post-test column on there, and that is provided for you in the course shell. I should see the actual rubric that you assess the performance assessment on, as well as the results of how the students did on that performance assessment. And then if you are a bachelor student or an EPI student, your host teacher is going to be completing a Junior Internship 1 observation form. They should be assessing you or evaluating you while you are implementing this lesson and giving you feedback on that lesson. Once you have completed all of this, you are going to upload your mini-teach in the assignments part of the course. Your teacher, you're directing your host teacher, if you are not a teacher of record, if you're a bachelor's or EPI, your host teacher should send me a copy of your Junior Internship 1 form from their district email. And once I have that, then I'll mark that off as completed. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, please make sure that you reach out via email, via phone. I'm happy to meet with you on Teams so that we can go over ideas you have for your lesson plan or any questions that you may have. I really, really look forward to seeing your final product.